Tonight, witness to a deadly disaster in Alberta. A survivor shares the terrifying moment part of a mountain came crashing down.
I knew seeing that there's no way I was going to be able to survive that.
And a warning for hikers.
This extremely rare event appears to have been neither preventable nor predictable.
Punishing storms leave a trail of destruction across Saskatchewan.
Very quickly, things went really bad.
Internal trade and major projects.
The schedule carried.
The controversial bill passed in the House of Commons to help reshape Canada's response to Trump's trade war. The Governor General on reconciliation.
A lot of Indigenous people tell me that they feel that it has gone way too slow.
Mary Simon's message for the future. And marking a movie milestone. How a timeless classic changed the way we look at the water.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. We are hearing from a survivor tonight about the horrifying moment when rocks gave way, triggering a deadly slide in Alberta. The stunning and tragic scene in Banff National Park yesterday claimed 2 lives and left a community of hikers shaken. CTV's Mark Villani has more on the victims and what it was like for those who experienced the frightening ordeal.
Elizabeth Jackson holds her dog Juniper close, just mere hours after the pair were caught in the panic of what was supposed to be a peaceful hike in Banff's Rocky Mountains.
I thought I was going to die for sure.
The solo hiker had stopped to talk with others on the popular Bow Glacier Falls Trail. Moments later, the mountainside gave way.
I just looked over my left shoulder and saw this whole slab of rock. It looked like a multi-story building coming down. It was just a blur from there. I just got up and I ran.
When the dust settled, Jackson turned back to help. What she saw was devastating.
I walked up to where I saw people sprawled out and there was a lady wedged between rocks, somebody unresponsive on top of a boulder, and it was just complete panic. 2 people were killed, 3 others were taken by ground or air to hospital. The next of kin of one victim hasn't been notified, but the other victim, 70-year-old Yuda Heinrichs from Calgary, was a retired university instructor. She was out with her slow and steady hikers group. Her friends call her a kind, dedicated leader. On Friday, the emotions are still raw on nearby trails.
It's very sad, but I guess it's never possible to have 100% security.
You don't realize the impact that can have and just take people's lives. So
heard that on the news. It's very sad to hear that, but one never knows, unfortunately.
A smaller rock slide happened in the same area in August 2023. A woman was injured running from the area. RCMP and Parks Canada say both were caused by natural events that can't be predicted or prevented. Geologists suspect water seeping into the fractured rock is likely what triggered this massive collapse over the course of decades.
Water seeping into the ground, day after day, year after year, decade after decade, increasing the saturation.
But as the trail remains closed, some hikers just feel lucky to be alive.
That was not an easy thing to witness and to just be enjoying the day and then have that happen.
Mark Villani, CTV News in Lake Louise.
Today is the first day of summer and the season is off to a punishing start with a trail of destruction from severe storms in some parts of the country and a forecasted heat warning for others. In Saskatchewan, several possible tornadoes touched down. CTV's Alison Bamford takes us through the wicked weather in that province.
Straight over there.
Bobby Kersnar has seen enough tornadoes to know when to pay attention to the sky, and yesterday he was looking up.
And then very quickly things went really bad.
Kersnar took shelter at his campsite near Crono, Saskatchewan, but not before capturing this video from across the lake.
I think it's coming here. Sure looks like it. It's huge.
It was a very loud roar, extremely loud, almost deafening, the sound.
The storm is one of 8 possible tornadoes that likely touched down in Saskatchewan last night. Environment Canada is looking to confirm. The same tornado that Kersnar captured ripped the roof off this farmhouse and spit out the debris east of Regina. Further south, Ricky Forbes chased the supercell near Frobisher, Saskatchewan, where 3 possible tornadoes were reported.
So multiple down power lines. And like I said, the one oil field tanker got thrown over half a mile into another farmer's field. So that shows the power that this storm had.
The storms spanned from southeast of Saskatoon down to the southeastern corner of the province. The first one hitting around 4:30 yesterday afternoon, the last one clocking in shortly after 9 p.m.
To have 8 tornadoes in one day is a substantial event. In terms of is this going to become more common or not in the future, it's a little hard to say.
Saskatchewan has already seen 4 tornadoes this year. While still unconfirmed, yesterday's possible tornadoes could bring the count to 12, already nearing the yearly average of 15, with 3 months of tornado season still ahead. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
Violent storms, including a possible tornado, also rolled into parts of Quebec last night. Powerful winds tore off roofs and knocked out power to tens of thousands in the eastern townships. Environment Canada says the storm produced winds of 100 kilometers per hour and hailstones as big as golf balls in central Quebec. The House of Commons passed controversial Bill C-5 late this evening, right before rising for the summer break. The legislation paves the way for the government to approve major projects across Canada, despite pushback from some Indigenous groups. CTV's Rachel Aiello on what this means moving forward.
Carried. It was a late-breaking parliamentary victory today for the federal government. The Liberals' contentious One Canadian Economy Bill C-5 cleared the House of Commons, thanks to votes from Conservatives.
The real work begins now.
For days, opponents called Prime Minister Mark Carney out for rushing the legislation at the expense of Indigenous consultation.
Violating UNDRIP, violating environmental standards, violating the health and safety of workers.
Immediately after the bill passed, Carney sought to ease those concerns.
The first thing we will do to launch the implementation of this legislation in the right way is through full-day summits with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis rights holders, leadership, and experts.
The Prime Minister now plans to start meeting with Indigenous rights holders in July, promising these meetings will include public roundtables.
To build in a truly Canadian way, and a truly Canadian way is in full partnership with Indigenous peoples, which this creates the ability to do so, in fact creates the requirement to do so.
As Carney was making this announcement, MPs adjourned their work in Ottawa until September. But there will be no break from politics this summer, with the opposition promising to keep the pressure on.
We'll see what happens now. We want to see whether or not Mark Carney and the rest of the Liberal government, who have spent years fighting against the energy sector, if they can actually get results.
Bill C-5 is now before the Senate, which is expected to sign off on it by the end of next week, leaving other pieces of legislation lingering until the fall. Heather?
Rachel Aiello in Ottawa, thank you. The Quebec mother accused of abandoning her 3-year-old daughter in rural Ontario will remain in detention until a bail hearing next month. Her lawyer says the woman is dealing with a range of emotions.
As of right now, it's a person that's in very high distress.
The 3-year-old girl was spotted by a police drone about 50 kilometers from the Quebec border. She was found alone on the side of a highway on Wednesday, 4 days after her mother reported the girl missing. The 34-year-old woman was in court today and faces 1 count of unlawful abandonment of a child. Tragic news tonight in a missing persons case in Brandon, Manitoba. Police say the body of 18-year-old Owen Bedfords was found in a river. He was last seen leaving a bar in the early hours of Sunday morning. Investigators, along with friends and family, launched an extensive search in the area in the days that followed. To the Middle East, and no signs of de-escalation, with Israel and Iran still battling it out. World leaders are in Europe trying to find a way out of a spiraling regional war as Donald Trump considers U.S. military action. CTV's Heather Wright on the talks and strikes from both sides.
This is the aftermath of an Iranian strike on the Israeli port city of Haifa, as both sides exchanged fresh attacks for the 8th consecutive day.
Mr. Minister,
While in Geneva, Iran's foreign minister arrived for a meeting with top diplomats from Britain, France, and Germany, a meeting that ended with no signs of a breakthrough. Iran was urged by the Europeans to make significant concessions to its nuclear program, but said there is no room for diplomatic talks until Israel stops its missile strikes, something U.S. President Donald Trump said was unlikely.
I think it's very hard to make that request right now. If somebody's winning, it's a little bit harder to do than if somebody's losing.
Trump says he wants to be the peacemaker in this conflict and will decide in the next 2 weeks whether the United States will join and provide Israel with the bunker-busting bomb it needs to hit Iran's nuclear site Fordo, which is buried deep in a mountain.
If they launch that bunker buster, now we got United States, in a war with Israel, fighting against a power that called Iran that wants to have a nuclear capability. It could then potentially draw in Russia. It could, raise the dander of China. This would change the political calculus tremendously, and I don't think anybody wants that to happen.
Global Affairs Canada says it is organizing flights in neighboring countries, urging Canadians in Israel and Iran to head to Jordan, Turkey, and Armenia. Hi, Hossein. Hossein Hodabash is among the many trying to leave Iran. He's not Canadian, but has lived in Toronto since 2019 and has a valid work permit, but his temporary resident visa recently expired. He's now stuck in Iran and doesn't know when he'll get out.
When the war happened, it was like just a nightmare. I don't know about the future. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Airspace above both Israel and Iran is closed, and while Canada has an embassy in Israel, it has had no diplomatic ties with Iran since 2012, further complicating efforts to get Canadians out of the country. Heather.
CTV's Heather Wright in Toronto. The UN issued a new warning today about the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
You have 500,000 people facing starvation with a lethal choice of being forced into very small pockets where most people can't access, into what are officially known as combat sites.
The UN's children agency, UNICEF, also says there's a new threat, a lack of safe drinking water. It says just 40% of Gaza's drinking water production facilities are functional and that children could begin dying of thirst in man-made drought conditions. Coming up.
2 different cars put into one.
That's correct.
A Franken car.
A Franken car.
Inspecting a lucrative tactic car thieves are using. All week, W5 has been investigating how thieves disguise stolen cars. Tonight, there are new calls to better secure vehicle registration systems right across the country in the face of sophisticated scams. And as W5's John Woodward tells us, some provinces don't even track suspicious registration.
Every car that sits in the Edmonton Police Vehicle Seizure Lot has a story. And it was Mike Fair's job to uncover those stories when he worked in the Edmonton Police's auto theft unit. This truck, an interesting challenge.
We have a 2014 Dodge Ram that, after examination, it was found that it's actually sitting on a 2021 Dodge Ram frame that was stolen.
2 different cars put into one.
That is correct.
A Franken car.
A Franken car, that's right.
The entire Franken car was seized as stolen property. The unsuspecting buyers on the hook for car payments, Fair says. And it's just one example of how more stolen cars are being mixed in with the legitimate supply, more common in Ontario, but edging west across the country, Fair says.
It's an incredibly high reward to be able to take a wrecked vehicle, put stolen parts on it, and then sell it to some victim.
How much money are we talking about?
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Per truck.
Per truck.
Government agencies are supposed to check these cars match their vehicle identification numbers, the 17-digit numbers that are supposed to uniquely identify the car.
If you can change or clone or make up a VIN, it's a great way for criminals to make money.
Dan Service runs VIN verification services, which inspects vehicles for the governments of Saskatchewan and Alberta. He says too many provinces fail to catch fakes because they're not checking VINs against other databases and then physically inspecting suspicious vehicles.
Those provinces create the opportunity for criminals to create false VINs or use VINs from salvaged vehicles or use VINs from cars that they've seen in a parking lot.
At least 3 Service Ontario employees have been charged and 1 convicted of registering fake vehicles to help organized criminals. We tracked one of the cars that had been revinned and sold to an unsuspecting customer. Frank Rizko's family was denied insurance coverage.
How much did that car cost?
Roughly $100,000.
$100,000 that just vanished that day.
Exactly.
We asked each province how often they flag suspicious VINs for inspection. Many said they do check against police databases, but only Quebec had a hard number at 225. In Ontario, where the bulk of cars are stolen, the answer was the Ministry of Transportation does not have that information.
What does that tell you?
I think it's a very honest response. If you don't have someone going out to look, I mean, the criminals have essentially carte blanche.
He's concerned if trucks like these don't get inspected, too many stolen vehicles will remain on the road, appearing legit and enriching criminals. We caught up with Ontario's Minister of Transportation.
What is the province doing to make sure that people aren't buying stolen cars?
Look, we have no mercy on those who are stealing these vehicles. We want to come down hard on them. We've passed legislation.
But our next question was on how Ontario doesn't track its inspections of suspicious cars. And on that, the Premier jumped in.
Thank you. You're bang on. You can't manage anything unless you measure it, I promise you. They're going to be measured. And throw these guys in jail, too, for a few years, teach them a lesson.
That new policy may make what Frank Rizko's family went through happen a lot less.
I think they should have a better system to ensure that the vehicle actually matches with the VIN number.
He says government should ensure every vehicle buyer is confident they have the real story about any car they buy.
Still ahead tonight, a critical conversation with the Governor General ahead of National Indigenous Peoples Day. Tomorrow is National Indigenous Peoples Day, but a decade after the Truth and Reconciliation Report was released, a vast majority of the calls to action haven't been implemented. CTV's chief anchor and senior editor Omar Sachedina spoke with Governor General Mary Simon about the matter.
In the Heart Garden on the grounds of Rideau Hall, symbols of the courage, sacrifice, and pain of students who went through the residential school system.
I remember the sacrifice these students made. They lost their lives to try and get an education.
There are still denialists out there who underplay what happened. What's your message to them?
It's not made up. Denialism needs to be addressed, and I think one of the ways in which we need to do this as a country is to put it into our education system.
10 years after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released a report with 94 calls to action, only 13 have been implemented. The Governor General has strong reflections on the progress still needed.
A lot of Indigenous people tell me that they feel that it has gone way too slow.
Do you personally feel that the progress has been slow?
Looking at it from an Indigenous viewpoint, everything is slow, I find.
At a time when Ottawa is pushing legislation to fast-track infrastructure projects, there's concern from some Indigenous groups who feel it tramples on their rights, some even calling on the Governor General to deny or delay that legislation. No Governor General has refused royal assent. This one, a former Indigenous advocate, admits to the occasional challenge of now serving in a role that must be kept apolitical. Do you feel as though those two identities clash for you at times?
It's not so much a clash. I struggle with those issues as an individual, as a person, as a human. The Prime Minister has conveyed that he's going to consult and include Indigenous people in the economic development of the country.
Her family history is tied closely to Canada's oldest company. She grew up in Nunavik with her Inuk mother and white father, who managed a local Hudson's Bay outpost. We visited it in northern Quebec back in 2021, shortly before she was installed. With HBC going bust, there are concerns about the fate of thousands of historic Indigenous artifacts. The company was recently given the green light to move forward with an auction to pay off creditors.
Any artifacts that are directly related to any Indigenous community, I think, should be brought back. These are things that belong to the people.
Her duty to the people of Canada and the Crown on display recently during a royal visit from King Charles.
The true North is indeed strong and free.
Were you surprised when the King used those words?
No, I wasn't really surprised. I think the North is strong and free. It has always been strong and free. To provide a message in a throne speech to the international community saying our Canadian North is true, strong, and free is appropriate.
A country strong and free, for which she shares a powerful message of optimism.
There will always be times when things become more difficult. I try and talk about hope, because hope is not just the future. Hope is today.
Still ahead tonight, Jaws turns 50. The movie's influence on pop culture and beyond. Today marks 50 years since the timeless shark shocker Jaws hit theaters. CTV's John Valley-Rao on how it changed Hollywood and our perception of sharks.
This shark, swallow you whole.
Undoubtedly the most famous two notes in movie history. Jaws was packed to the gills, not just with memorable music, shark! But so many iconic scenes and legendary lines.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
The tale of a massive shark terrorizing a sleepy seaside New England town, picking off beachgoers, and 50 years ago becoming an instant smash, #1 at the U.S. box office for 14 consecutive weeks and terrifying audiences. Directed by a 27-year-old Steven Spielberg, in a new documentary, he reveals the movie was way over budget and 100 days over schedule.
I was terrified I was going to be fired.
But instead, the film was credited with inventing the summer blockbuster.
It set the template for the way that summer movies were released. Before Jaws, the summer was kind of considered to be a downtime for theaters.
Everybody likes the original poster t-shirt.
In the Martha's Vineyard town where the movie was filmed, they're ready to cash in on the anniversary. But not everyone thinks the film should be celebrated. It instilled a deep fear of sharks that led to them being hunted more and put an already endangered species at greater risk. One man recently swam in the waters where the movie was made to raise awareness about them.
My message to people around the world is we have to protect sharks.
Still, there's been a string of shark scares this week, including a 9-year-old bitten off Florida.
Shark in the pond!
And spotted just off Rhode Island, a massive 7-meter-long basking shark, though it poses no threat to humans. Unlike that movie shark, still scaring audiences 50 years later. John Valley-Rao, CTV News.
That is our newscast for this Friday evening. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.